shops, pop-up bars. It is that time of the year with parties, and more holiday parties. On today's All Things Heart, what drinking more than usual for just one night can do to your heart. Good morning, I'm Alexis Del Cid. Welcome to All Things Heart. Eggnog, boozy hot chocolates, Grinch cocktails, peppermint espresso martinis, Christmas margaritas. Who's thirsty? The list goes on and on. Festive drinks made for the holidays are everywhere. Cardiologists have their own name, though, for what can happen to some of us this time of year from all those yummy cocktails. Holiday heart. And this one is not so festive. Have you heard of holiday heart?
No, I have not. No, I haven't. No.
While holiday heart may not be a familiar term, a basic hangover has happened to the best of us. Have you ever had too much to drink?
Yes.
Whether it's that one time in college or your best friend's wedding last month, most of us have overindulged at least once in our adult lives. And for many, once was enough.
Loss of equilibrium, inability to think straight, and inability to reason, loss of inhibition.
With drinking, it kind of slows down motivation a little bit. It makes you tired, makes you not want to be as active and stuff.
But avoiding alcohol altogether can be incredibly difficult.
I drank more during the pandemic because there was nothing to do, and I didn't have to anywhere to get up to go.
Not to mention, references to drinking seem to be everywhere you look or click these days.
Oh, how it's wine o'clock somewhere, or you just, everywhere I go there's a t-shirt or a towel or a magnet or something with it on it.
About drinking.
I definitely think it's become so normalized drinking. There's everything you do is drinking, the paint and sip, you know what I'm talking about? I don't know, I think it's become so normalized now, and social media probably plays a part into that for sure.
It's definitely a huge influence of, drinking and stuff.
But can 1 week or even one night of drinking more than usual really have an effect on your heart? Cardiologists say absolutely. Holiday heart, also known as alcohol-induced atrial arrhythmias, is very real. It manifests with heart palpitations, a racing heart, or shortness of breath. In fact, a recent study funded by the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism shows just one beer, wine, or cocktail can have an immediate effect on your heart rhythm, significantly increasing your chances of atrial fibrillation within just a couple of hours, even if you have no underlying history of heart disease. Well, that definitely is not as festive as the music in that story. Joining us to talk about the impact of alcohol on your heart is interventional cardiologist Dr. Dusan Stanojevic and electrophysiologist Dr. Rhea Pimentel. Thank you both for being here. I know you're super busy doctors, so it's great that you're making time. We appreciate it. Dr. Pimentel, holiday heart is really another name for something very complicated sounding to non-medical people. It's alcohol-induced atrial arrhythmias. Not as catchy as holiday heart. How would you explain what that is to someone without a medical degree?
Well, let's see. So holiday heart is more of so classically, it is a syndrome that we see after somebody's drank a lot of alcohol the night before, typically. They will wake up, they'll have heart racing sensations, dizziness, lightheadedness, some nausea, and their heart rhythm will be abnormal. The good news about the arrhythmia is that it's not typically a life-threatening thing, and it usually resolves on its own. But something that has been well described for several years now.
So people will come to the emergency department thinking something really bad is happening, but it's
Correct.
from their own doing the night
And then
before.
when you talk to them about their history, they may admit that they went out for drinks with their old buddies last night or were at a great party and so forth. And
you probably can tell by looking at them that they had a rough night by the time they
do have a certain look to them, yes.
So can this happen to casual drinkers, just someone who has more than one drink? Have you ever seen that, where someone has just a couple of drinks and they get it?
Yes, usually it's more than a couple drinks. It's really how much they're used to drinking. So if you have somebody that drinks a couple drinks every night and then they have 4 drinks, then maybe they'd be more prone to holiday heart, or somebody that doesn't drink at all and then has 2 drinks, they could also get it.
And Dr. Stanojevich, there are other factors that can play a role into this. Can you run down some of those other factors?
Sure. I think right around holidays, everybody's stressed out about shopping and kind of getting all the things done for them, family coming into town. Also, overeating, indulging in other things, lack of sleep. All of those things can have an impact on a holiday heart and arrhythmias.
So all the things that come with the holidays,
Absolutely.
Basically all the sugar, the overeating, the stress, the running around. So a night of drinking, you feel rough the next day. What are the symptoms that someone would wake up with where they would know that they were in an episode of holiday heart?
Well, I think Dr. Pimentel kind of already mentioned it. Usually you're waking up, you might have a little bit elevated heart rate, you're feeling a little bit shaky, sometimes you have a pounding headache, just not feeling well, sweaty, nauseous. All of those things, just not feeling well, are part of the holiday heart syndrome. Doesn't mean that you have a rhythm problem, but those are some of the signs that you should be watching out for.
So the signs of a hangover
Basically.
Essentially,
are
yes.
also the signs of holiday heart. When it comes to the kinds of drinks, Dr. Pimentel, I wanted to ask a cardiologist about this for a while because remember a couple decades ago, Red Bull and vodkas, those were a big deal. Now we have espresso martinis are making a comeback, and people are mixing caffeine and alcohol, which are two of the things that can trigger holiday heart. So what is your thought as a cardiologist and electrophysiologist about combining caffeine and alcohol?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right about that. The caffeine or the Red Bull portion of those drinks will rev up the heart and make it more sensitive, give us a more sympathetic tone.
Right.
So we would not advise that, especially somebody with a history of heart rhythm problems to begin with, to be doing those two in combination.
I know so many people that mix Red Bull
Yeah.
and vodka. And is that dangerous?
I mean, I think it's dangerous in the fact that it's really going to rev up your heart and put you in more of a risk of
Right.
having arrhythmias and depending on, whether you have underlying coronary disease, and maybe Dushan can answer that one, it could increase your risk for developing ischemia or threatened heart attack.
Dr. Stanojevich, go on.
Yes, I think just in general, Red Bull is probably a bad idea.
In general?
In general,
Worse
I think
than
it's
Coca-Cola or sodas with
absolutely,
caffeine?
absolutely. I think there's a lot more than just the caffeine in there, and there's lots of caffeine. They've done studies. There's a study just recently published called Munich Brew 2, where they actually took patients that were going to Beer Fest, and they monitored them for 48 hours with the EKG while they were drinking. And with the drinking, they noticed that their heart rate was going on, and they were having ectopy, so premature beats. And on top of that, you then start adding caffeine or energy drinks that are also known to cause this. That's creating a nidus, essentially, for creating more and more arrhythmias, atrial fibrillation among them. But as Dr. Pimentel said, sympathetic system, which is fight or flight, is revved up with alcohol and then caffeine and whatever else is in the energy drinks. So combine all of that, arrhythmia is much more likely to happen. Even in the young patients, most of these patients, they were observing things in this study were very young. Average age was 29. So between 23 up to 50 some years of age were actually more prone to arrhythmias because they were drinking more as well.
Gosh, the Kansas City Beer Festival is my favorite event in all of Kansas City. We go every year. So where was this study done?
In Germany.
So in Germany, they have a lot of beer too.
Munich Brew, that's what Oktoberfest.
And people volunteered to wear heart monitors
yes,
for
they
it.
had over 200 volunteers, and they previously looked at over 3,000 of them. There was this was the second part of the study, and they kind of retrospectively looked at it. So Germans were putting basically to science how bad is beer for you, essentially.
Oh, geez. Hey, to the Kansas City Beer Fest and Chamber of Commerce, I'm still going, but I will keep that in mind. It's good to keep in mind, especially if you have a heart condition. Now, Dr. Pimentel is an electrophysiologist. You study rhythm disorders of the heart. You say you're the plumber.
That's correct.
And you're the electrician
Correct.
of the heart. There's a study out of the American College of Cardiology that states that even just one glass of wine, beer, or one cocktail can double your chance of AFib within 4 hours. Is that for everyone or just people who are at risk with underlying conditions?
That's a really good question. So this study was actually published a couple years ago and really changed the way that we thought about alcohol and its effects on rhythm issues. This particular study was done in patients who had a history of AFib, but was what we would consider a randomized trial, meaning that they controlled all the variables. They didn't depend on the patient to tell them how much alcohol they drank. They actually gave them the alcohol and then assessed what their risk is of having a rhythm problem. And like as you mentioned, just having one drink doubles your risk of having atrial fibrillation hours after the drink. So not right at the time that you're drinking it, but in that sort of, for lack of a better word, hangover period. And if you just had 2 drinks, your risk of having AFib would increase almost 4 times. So sort of indicating that there's not really any safe amount of alcohol to drink if you have a history of heart rhythm problems to begin with.
And if you don't have that history?
We don't have any studies to prospectively show it, although again there's a lot of retrospective looking back at patients that come through the ER who don't have a history of AFib but yet show up with holiday heart. We have that data that suggests that you are still at higher risk for having this with alcohol.
And so that brings me to my next question for both of you is what do you tell your friends or your family before they go out to a boozy holiday party? And are you constantly in a state of worry? We all have kids that are going to be, yours are in college, mine's going into college, you have a child in high school. So what do you tell people in your life when they're going out on a New Year's Eve or for a holiday party? Do you have advice?
It's a great question, but I think just like anything in life, moderation is the key.
Yeah.
There are controversy about if all alcohol is completely bad. I don't want anybody to come out of this just thinking that you should not drink at all. I think moderation is the key. I think there's pretty clear guidance on that, and there are somewhat, you can call it sexist, you can call it age discriminatory, but if you're under age of 65, you're a male, you should be not drinking more than 3 drinks in a day, not more than 14 drinks in a week. For females, it's usually considered 1 drink a day. Anything over that is considered binge or like excessive for a day, versus 7 to 8 drinks in a week. If you're over the age of 65, even if you're a male, it's considered anything more than 1 drink is considered to be excessive in a day. So again, those are recommendations. There is a French paradox that is well known and advertised in alcohol industry because the French live longer despite smoking a lot and maybe not eating as healthy because they think it was attributed to wine. It's controversial, but it is known that there is some moderate amount of alcohol might be beneficial as well to the heart overall. But the types of drinks are important. We talked already about caffeine and mixed drinks versus wine or beer that might be less toxic to a certain extent.
And I think also hydrating beforehand and during. So I always tell my patients, if you're planning on going out and having a really great time, every drink of alcohol should be followed by a glass of water. I think that helps.
It's a good rule.
2 ways, it kind of fills you up, plus on top of it, you avoid the dehydrating effects of alcohol. Alcohol is a diuretic. It makes you go to the bathroom. So even though you're taking in fluid, if it's alcohol, you're actually putting out more than you're taking in. And that sort of also contributes to this holiday heart and the sensation of a hangover afterwards.
This is just a personal, I've always wondered this, when a cardiologist is at a holiday party, is it hard to unwind with a glass of wine because you're thinking about the effects of the wine? Can you ever unwind and just have a glass of wine, or are you worried
Absolutely.
about?
Yes, absolutely.
So it doesn't get in the way of things.
No, definitely not.
Because, you deserve to relax and enjoy things.
Yes.
We have a lot of questions already coming in, so if you have a question or a comment that you would like to share or like us to read, just send it to us on YouTube, Facebook, or the All Things Heart email. You will find the links to all the ways you can connect with us in real time right there on your screen. So Dr. Stanoyevich, the social factor of this season plays a huge role in this. You've got Thanksgiving, Christmas if you celebrate that, or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa, New Year's Eve, all the other work parties and gatherings that we're invited to. Alcohol.org finds that 47% of men surveyed binge drink on New Year's Eve compared to 40% of women, and you talked about this a little bit, defining what is binge drinking. They define it for men as 4 or more, women for 4 or more drinks in 2 hours, and men it's 5 or more drinks. that does sound like a lot. You mentioned the word sexist, but isn't it more science that they come to that?
Yes, they feel like the studies have shown that maybe because of different size and fat content, men tend to have more fat reserves, that maybe absorption is a little bit different between the two genders, and that's why there is this discrepancy in 4 to 5 drinks being considered binge drinking. So that's basically purely on physiology.
What if, Dr. Pimentel, someone is day drinking and they're at a party like a St. Patty's Day or something, and they drink 4 or 5 drinks throughout the course of a long day? Is that still binge drinking? Because you're drinking.
If you're drinking more than you usually do, I think that you can consider that binge drinking. So I would call that binge drinking.
I would agree.
And that's probably startling for people watching, because I think when you say binge drinking, people have a whole connotation about keg stands and shots and
pass down the corner.
Yeah.
And so
exactly,
forth.
but binge drinking can be over the course of a day, drinking more than normal.
Absolutely.
And Dr. Pimentel, how often do you see people come in having had some sort of heart event triggered by drinking?
So I'm an electrophysiologist, and so I would say fairly frequently, especially the younger they are. Atrial fibrillation in itself is really a disorder of older patients. So when you see the 25-year-old, the 30-year-old that shows up in the ER with AFib, you got to be thinking to yourself that there's something else going on. And we often see them in follow-up in the clinics and talk to them about, hey, you need to cut down on the drinking, stop with the binge drinking, and sometimes that's enough to really kind of tamp down those future AFib events.
To scare them
them too, yes.
Which is, fear is a powerful motivator.
It absolutely is.
Dr. Stanojevic, you're nodding your head yes. You see that as well?
Yes, I think younger patients, which is surprising, as Dr. Pimentel said, atrial fibrillation usually older population disease, but very young patients after a night of partying, sometimes vacationing, going to all-inclusive resorts.
For spring break or something.
Spring break. Actually, I see a lot in the 40-plus-year-old, 40 to 50-year-olds, especially guys that went on a buddy trip for college, like a reunion, and they thought that they were back in the 20s reliving their life, and they'd come back with the atrial fibrillation symptoms. So you have to be very careful about that.
We also talked about overeating can be a cause of holiday heart. Can eating a ton of sugar, a lot of cookies and sweet things, can that trigger a heart pounding event?
I suppose possibly. I think just overeating or overindulging in everything is a problem, but I think it just creates more stress in a combination with alcohol, with holiday stress that we talked about. I think all together definitely can cause issues.
Have you seen sugar-induced heart rhythm problems or episodes?
Not alone, right? They have to have something else, like the alcohol on top of it. The sugar is going to rev up your heart. It's going to give you that sympathetic flight or fight response.
When you say sympathetic response, you mean the fluttering?
Yes.
And the jittery, the jitters.
So you add that to the alcohol, and it's bad combination.
Well, and then we have the double whammy. In some drinks, there's caffeine, lots of sugar. In any of those signature holiday drinks, there's going to be a lot of sugar, and you have the alcohol. What would be your advice for someone who already has high cholesterol and they're going out for a night? Does your having high cholesterol also affect how you metabolize things?
Probably.
I don't think so. I think just in general, being cognizant that, as we mentioned some of the studies, even patients that have not had any issue before can trigger some of these symptoms and these arrhythmias. If you're prone and you have some cardiac conditions, and Dr. Pimentel mentioned one of the studies, it's very much more likely that you would have arrhythmias, so you have to be cognizant. So if you already have some underlying cardiovascular issues, you certainly have to be more cognizant of that, but doesn't mean that people that don't have any excuse for going all out.
Would your advice be don't drink, or just be very cognizant?
I don't think not drinking, and we kind of heard your intro, people drink. I think moderation is the key, and for everything, including food, holidays, and just hydration, pacing yourself, and again, kind of following some of the guidelines we talked about, I think would be a reasonable thing. But expecting people not to drink is not what we are proposing. As you heard, we enjoy a good glass of wine.
Trying to be realistic.
Yes.
Trying to be realistic.
Realistic, allowing people to still participate and have fun. You know, I sometimes will tell my patients, eat beforehand.
Right.
Because some of the things that, you know, you come, you're really hungry, you're super excited to be with your friends. Next thing you know, there's plates of cookies and stuff going around. That's all you're having for dinner. If you eat a little bit beforehand, you know, some of that is the hunger part of it is taken
Actually,
out.
I've heard that advice from doctors before, to never go to a holiday party hungry.
Yes.
Even if you know there's going to be food, you
Yes.
should have something safe beforehand.
Protein.
Some sort of protein.
Yes.
Okay. And another question about the stress, which is, as you talked about, a huge part of this. Do you have any tips for people who are watching this, and maybe they're not big drinkers, but they already can feel their heart fluttering thinking of all the family members that are about to arrive at their house? And it's not just the stress of preparing for them, it's the conversations around the table and all the dynamics of the personalities. As cardiologists, I'll start with you, Dr. Stanojevic. What's your advice for people who already know they're going into a stressful situation?
Well, I think you have to relax and kind of realize that you cannot create a perfect holiday. I think you don't want to be on Norman Rockwell and try to recreate something that's just kind of out in the movies. You probably need to do something more realistic and just try to decompress and enjoy family, even if it's not perfect. The conversation, everything else, it's just part of holidays, and you take it. I think that's why a lot of people go to alcohol, trying to
take the edge off,
yeah. Which can have a double-edged sword. But stress, just like we talked about alcohol causing the sympathetic drive up, like just fear, increasing the heart rate, the same thing can happen with the stress. So you're kind of substituting one for the other. But just be realistic that not everything has to be perfect, and just take it what it is. Just time for it with the family and enjoy it.
And you're good at that, Dr. Pimentel. You're talking about you have plans with your girls, and you have one girl that's more type A, and the other girl, you just go with the flow.
I try and go with the flow. At my core, I'm very much type A, and I like to plan.
Okay.
And so what I would say is absolutely don't have high expectations, but also plan for those conversations. Try and plan. If you don't want to talk to Uncle Paul about his political beliefs, then know that you have some way of getting out of it, or somebody that can help you with that kind of stuff.
Chugging the wine is not a good way to deal with Uncle Paul.
Chugging the wine is not the way to do that. Yes.
Can you treat holiday heart quickly? When you see someone in your clinic space and they have holiday heart, what do you tell them?
Well, depending on how badly they're feeling, it's usually symptom control. So most of these patients are dehydrated. So we give them fluids, IV fluids, if necessary, and try and basically treat a hangover, right? So ibuprofen, just a lot of rest and some protein and things like that. Get them something to eat and so forth. It's a pretty, like I said, a pretty benign disorder. It doesn't feel good, but I would say about 95% of the episodes will resolve on their own within 24 hours.
Which is reassuring.
Very much so.
For people who feel like they're in it. We do have questions coming in from our viewers, so I want to get to those, and I want to start with Jamie. Jamie writes, sometimes my heart races when I drink. How do I know if I have to go to the emergency department or just wait it out? Does she need to go to the ED when her heart races when she drinks?
If that's her only symptom, and I guess I would challenge to ask how fast, because if your heart races and it's going 200 beats a minute, then definitely you need to go to the emergency room. But if it just feels like it's going fast, then I think that's just your body's clue to say, you've had enough, get some water or something else to drink other than alcohol.
You mentioned protein a few times. Is protein better to eat than carbs when you're...
I think so, because you don't have that rise and fall in sugar that you would with protein, so that kind of stabilizes your levels.
Sean Curry has a question. Dr. Stanojevic, I'll take this one to you. Is one glass of wine a day or beer, one glass of beer a day, in any way beneficial for heart health? I hear you saying it won't kill you, but is it beneficial?
Well, I think there is some evidence of that. We talked about the French paradox, where they are, French are known to enjoy their wine, and there are some Mediterranean cultures that drink quite a bit of wine with their meals. So I think moderation of alcohol, so one glass of wine or beer certainly has shown some cardiovascular benefits and kind of increased longevity of patients' life expectancy. So there might be there's some controversy whether that's completely true or not, but I think certainly one glass of wine or beer a night, as long as then that doesn't extend into 5 or 6 on the weekend, I think it's more than reasonable and potentially beneficial.
And I suppose you've got to say define glass. Are you pouring a giant stein of wine or beer, or are you having a beer?
Yes, or a glass of wine, yes.
Right. Okay, Jean Reardon has a question. Dr. Pimentel, let's get this one to you. Is there anything you can do to prevent this other than not have a drink?
I mean, I think some of the stuff we talked about, maybe eating a little beforehand, drinking lots of water. Despite all of those mechanisms, if you drink more than usual, and again, I think the definition was 4 drinks in one sitting for a woman and 5 in a man, you will likely just have it. You'll have the holiday heart, no matter how hard you try. You may be able to attenuate some of the symptoms, but if you drink that much, you'll probably still have it.
I think isn't 4 a bottle of wine?
It's a lot.
4 wines is a bottle of wine.
So
if
one
you're drinking
glass of alcohol is either 12 ounces of beer, I think 5 ounces of wine. It's a shot. It's different depending on what you're drinking.
I've never seen a 5-ounce pour, by the way. Unless you're at a winery and they're just pouring little tastes.
So yeah, most people in a restaurant have more than what's considered a glass of wine.
Right.
Yeah, 5 ounces would look like a thimble if you got it at a restaurant. One more follow-up question from Jeremy. Jeremy wants to know if you see this more commonly in certain age groups.
Certainly in younger patients, I think, and younger and middle-aged patients that are maybe not have any problems and they think they're invincible or they have nothing going on, and so they just kind of keep drinking probably more excessively than some older patients with maybe some condition, and they're a little more cautious about it.
And then I have a question from Marie. I'll take this to Dr. Pimentel. Marie writes, one time in college after a heavy night of drinking, I woke up with the worst shaking hands. So she wants to know, did she trigger an episode of AFib?
Probably not. I mean, I guess
What's
if it
with
was
the
just shaking hands and not an irregular heartbeat and racing, I mean, you wouldn't know, obviously, unless you came in and got an EKG.
Right.
I think the shaking hands is part of the sort of mild alcohol withdrawal, the quote hangover that you would get from
Even
alcohol
after a
intoxication after a night. And again, a reference to that sympathetic drive that we will see sometimes associated with alcohol.
For some final thoughts from our guests, I want to start with Dr. Stanojevich. What do you want people to take away from this program who are watching right now, about to hit a holiday weekend starting tomorrow?
Well, I think we don't want them to say don't drink at all. I think that's not a message, but I think just pace yourself in moderation and take it easy. Don't try to prove you're your 20-year-old kid in college and just wanting to drink and show everybody off.
Even if you're 20, don't do that.
Probably not the best idea.
Right.
And so, good point. But I think just moderation and just realize that even though you're young or have no other problems, you might be at a risk for this.
And Dr. Pimentel?
Yeah, I agree. Everything in moderation. Try and drink as much water as you can to avoid some of the kind of complications or hangover type symptoms afterwards. But don't drink and drive too. That's the other thing.
Absolutely. There are too many easy ways to get home now. There's absolutely no need to drink and drive with how many ride service apps are at our fingertips.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for taking time to join us today. Hope that your holiday season is nice and slow. You don't get a rush of patients and you can enjoy time with your families. And right now, you can scan the QR code on your screen. For our viewers, if you scan that code, that's where you can watch or share any of our past episodes. It'll take you to links of all of those. And for the next few weeks, we're going to be on hiatus, working on season 7 of All Things Heart. It's been 7 seasons kickoff coming up in February. So you can still join us, though, every Thursday at 8 a.m. for encore presentations. You're going to hear and see some of our favorite programs. We hope they are yours, too. We love our viewers, and we really appreciate you joining the conversations and enjoying our programs. And season 7 debuts on February 6th. We're going to have some amazing stories to share with you. We're also going to be keeping an eye on all the public health topics and any developments that happen over the course of our hiatus. And if any news breaks health-wise, we will bring that to you live right here from our studios. In the meantime, have a great rest of the week. Have a wonderful holiday season. Thank you so much for watching us. We'll see you right back here for season 7 in February.
Coming up Friday on the Morning Medical Update. After 4 years, this COVID long hauler is finally making progress. I'm Jessica Lovell on the next Morning Medical Update. Life after long COVID, an update from Anil Garmalkar. Plus, are flu and RSV rates heating up? We take the temperature of the respiratory virus season. Friday at 8.